War is brutal, but even amid the chaos, soldiers have to follow rules, whether they make sense or not. Here are some of the strangest things that are banned in war and the military. Soldiers are allowed to do anything that is militarily necessary to win in combat, but they're not allowed to be cruel for no reason. This applies to certain deadly weapons, but it also applies to the little things. The Geneva Convention, which regulates the laws of war, prohibits filing down your bullets to make them likely to expand on contact. The only purpose of this is to make them harder to remove, similar to hollow point bullets. There's no military benefit to making more enemy soldiers die on the operating table, so the Hague says that's a no-no. War might seem like a time for no mercy, but there are limits. You've probably seen it in the movies. The army moves in, and the ruthless commander barks out, "No quarter given!" This means the army goes wild, killing any enemy soldiers they come across, even slaughtering anyone who tries to surrender. This was common in past wars, but it's now strictly against the law. Quartering refers to taking prisoners of war who are required to be treated humanely. Any military official who tortures or kills prisoners of war will be subject to war crime proceedings, as many Axis leaders found out after World War II. But what many people don't know is that even saying no quarter given breaks the law, because if a commander says it, his troops will likely consider it an order. Shockingly, in some cases, civilians are allowed to do more than military personnel. Tear gas, it's a common way to control chaotic crowds, but this is controversial in its own right. Tear gas is extremely painful. It can cause stampedes and tramplings and has caused accidental fatalities due to bad reactions. But it is legal as an alternative to deadly force in most circumstances. So why is it banned in war? Surely bullets aren't a more humane alternative. The difference is that in a war, it's assumed that deadly force will be used and firing on an incapacitated soldier is a war crime. So using tear gas in combat is likely to only serve the purpose of confusing the enemy soldier and making them easier to hit. But weapons aren't the only thing that hurts. Words hurt too. The treatment of prisoners of war is strictly regulated. Physically harming them or torturing them is a war crime. They have to be given access to medical attention and have their basic rights respected. And you better not say anything mean to them. Wait, what? It might sound silly at first, but there's a strict ban on insulting prisoners of war for a good reason. Humane treatment means no physical abuse, but it also protects them from intimidation and verbal assault. What does that mean? Well, it's up for debate, but the Geneva Convention is pretty broad, and it's believed that any sort of insults or threats violate the law. And it's not just the people you have to be careful about. Maybe your grandpa showed you a gold ring from his time in the war. He bragged that he took it off some Nazi soldier after he captured him, a memory of his heroic service. Or grandpa admitting to a serious crime. Unfortunately, it's probably the latter. By taking anything off the battlefield, you'd be partaking in the crime of pillaging. This applies to both civilians and enemy combatants, and anything taken from the battlefield must be inventoried and cleared by the military leadership. However, this law wasn't always very well enforced, especially in large wars. So the odds are no one's knocking down Grandpa's door at the old folks' home to try to take that ring back. But certain areas of the battlefield are more protected than others. It might be tempting to strike a killing blow against enemy forces by starving them of things every human being needs: food and water. Throughout history, burning farms and damaging or blocking the drinking supply was a common ruthless tactic of armies, but the Geneva Convention put an end to that practice. While there is an exception for military necessity, such as damage done in the middle of a firefight on farmland, intentionally damaging food or water supplies is considered a war crime. This is largely because the tactic would undoubtedly cause a larger impact, starving countless civilians in the area who rely on the supplies. And sometimes even fashion can be a crime. No, this isn't about wearing white after Labor Day, but why is it a violation of the Geneva Convention to wear light blue headgear on a combat uniform? This is a new law following the foundation of the United Nations and their peacekeeper force. That's because the UN got there first with a specific shade of blue, and they don't want any confusion. If an army wearing similar headgear enters the fray and is mistaken for UN peacekeepers, the enemy forces might surrender and allow the duplicitous army to massacre them. And then actual peacekeepers might be vulnerable to reprisal attacks. And it's not the only attire that's protected. This next one applies to vehicles. The Red Cross means one thing on the battlefield: help is coming. The International Peacekeeping and Medical Aid Group is commonly seen on battlefields and in combat zones, helping the wounded and aiding in evacuations. That's why the Geneva Convention strictly prohibits combat vehicles from putting any sort of Red Cross on their exterior, as well as the symbols of the Red Cross's sister organizations, the Red Crescent and the Red Shield of David. Placing one on a combat vehicle is considered illegal deception and a breach of the laws of war. Medics as a whole get special protection. Red Cross medical professionals are among the most protected people in combat because all combatants benefit from having medical help available to them. Not only is harming a medic a war crime, but it's illegal to interfere with them in any way. This even includes denying them access to a location. In the past, medical aid workers could come into an area, but the Army often wouldn't let them leave to ensure they were the only ones who would benefit. The Geneva Convention defines interfering with medics loosely, but it's generally believed to mean anything more than brief security checks is off-limits. The armies aren't the only side being regulated, though, as medics are forbidden to carry weapons in combat zones if they want to maintain non-combatant status. And they're not the only people protected by the Geneva Convention. Being a journalist covering a war takes some real courage. After all, bullets and bombs don't differentiate if you're in their way, and you don't get those iconic shots of the war by staying in a foxhole. The world believes that honest coverage of the horrors of war is important, so journalists have many regulations protecting them. Like medics, they're not allowed to carry weapons, but the unit they're stationed with is required to protect them by any means necessary. Because they chose to put their lives on the line to bring back the truth, their unit does the same to ensure they get back home. And deliberately targeting journalists is a war crime. But one person on the battlefield is considered even more sacred. They say there's no atheists in foxholes. Whether that's true or not, countless soldiers have found comfort in the words of the military chaplain. Chaplains are assigned to uphold the morale and religious health of their unit. But like medics, they're only allowed to enter combat to provide medical or spiritual aid. It's a terrifying and dangerous job, undertaken by men of faith, and over 400 U.S. chaplains have died in combat. But 8 have also won the Medal of Honor, which is all the more impressive given that they're not allowed to pick up a weapon without violating their role and surrendering their non-combatant status. But all civilians have some rights on the battlefield. There are few things scarier than being caught in the middle of a war zone. With armies on both sides, civilians often have few options, which is why international law requires armies to provide safe passage for civilians. Not only is it banned to fire on unarmed civilians or block them from fleeing, but the laws indicate the army should provide advance warning before attacks and allow safe corridors for civilian passage. Armies that essentially treat the civilian population in the area as hostages might face sanctions after the shooting stops. And certain buildings are off-limits as well. Armies are frequently targeting the infrastructure of their enemy, which can mean some massive explosions as buildings are taken down. To avoid excess civilian casualties, armies are required to provide ample warning to civilians to evacuate, and they're not supposed to target buildings that are there just for civilian purposes. This includes schools, hospitals, and media sites. However, armies often find ways around the law, and multiple states have gotten into controversy when fighting guerrilla armies that they claim hide out in civilian buildings. These laws apply to every army around the world, but there are some odd rules that apply to the US military as well. What happens in the bedroom stays in the bedroom, right? Not in the military. For civilians, adultery is a betrayal that can end a marriage, as well as result in a lamp thrown at your head from an angry wife. But in the military, it's a crime against the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Not only can it get you thrown out of the military with a dishonorable discharge, but it can result in a loss of pay and even imprisonment for up to a year. Why does the military crack down so hard on dishonorable spouses? It's not just morality. Commanders also worry that a cheating spouse trying to cover it up could be vulnerable to blackmail from enemy spies looking for intelligence on the unit. Sometimes it seems like the military just doesn't want you to have a good time. Okay, so we know we're not supposed to treat prisoners of war badly. They're soldiers too and entitled to their rights, but what about treating them too well? Surprisingly, a good number of soldiers have gotten into trouble for fraternizing with prisoners when one element was involved: alcohol. This can result in up to 3 months imprisonment and loss of pay, and it's not hard to see why. If a soldier gives a prisoner liquor and they drink together, lips start getting loose, and this could jeopardize base security. So keep those beers locked up, Private. And no matter how mad you get while drinking, don't do this. Surely nothing a former US Vice President did could get a soldier into trouble, right? Well, not if that Vice President is Aaron Burr, whose duel against Alexander Hamilton is remembered to this day. The military has strict regulations against dueling, which they define as challenging someone to combat or participating in a challenge. This applies whether the duel in question involves guns, blades, or even just fists, which means that settling things by fighting it out behind the dumpster like you did in elementary school will mean more than detention. It could mean confinement for a year, loss of pay, and a dishonorable discharge, assuming no one dies in the duel, of course. This next one might be a surprise, especially to Navy members. War is hell, right? It's enough to make you cuss like a sailor, but be careful, you don't want to do it while the admiral is watching. The Military Code of Justice actually prohibits indecent language, which it defines as anything grossly offensive to modesty, decency, or propriety. This one is probably not enforced all the time, After all, who has time for a court-martial over bad language in the middle of a war zone? But someone who curses out a superior officer could likely find themselves up on charges, and there exist very harsh penalties for breaking the rule, including up to 2 years imprisonment for any soldier who uses indecent language in front of a child. This one might seem silly, but it could be costly. It's been a long day on a Navy warship, and the sun is beating down hard. The blue water below looks awfully enticing, and you decide to take a dip. What's the worst that could happen? The answer is confinement up to 6 months, loss of pay and benefits, and a bad conduct discharge. Jumping off a vessel into the water is strictly prohibited, and this is mostly a safety measure. After all, no one knows what's lurking in the water below, and the brass wants to minimize accidental deaths and injuries. Also, if someone jumps off a moving vessel and the ship has to turn back to pick them up, it could be costly in time and money. And if you were picked last in gym class, you might want to think twice about signing up. No one likes those long, brutal marches in full gear, and it's easy to fall behind or get lost, especially in the jungle or woods. But try your best to keep up. Straggling on a march can actually be an offense that carries confinement of up to 3 months and forfeiture of pay for that same period. This isn't likely to be levied against someone who's exhausted, as they're usually just prodded to keep up loudly, but the law is on the book to deter people from getting lost and requiring manhunts to find them, or worse, from lagging behind the crowd and just using the opportunity to go AWOL. If you join the military, you better be ready to follow the rules. There are a lot of regulations enforced by the brass, and while violating these won't likely get you arrested or jailed, you're likely to face administrative discipline, like being confined to your base, losing privileges, or being ordered to do extra exercise. So many push-ups. And some of these can be pretty silly. For instance, if you're a lower-ranking soldier, don't even think about walking and holding a cell phone at the same time. Why? It's not because the brass is worried about you being able to keep your wits about you while crossing the street, it's because the troops need to be able to salute their officers at a moment's notice. US soldiers need to keep their wits about them, even when they're walking. Walking on someone else's grass is usually considered rude. You might have even had a grumpy neighbor yell at you when you took a shortcut. But keeping off the grass is never more important than when you're in the military. On military bases, everything is supposed to be in order, and that includes the greenery, so even mussing up the grass with your shoes can get you in serious trouble with a mercurial commanding officer. But there's one circumstance where you can walk on the grass with no trouble: when you're mowing it. Your comfort is probably not the military's top priority in a lot of situations. Soldiers should probably get used to standing in formation. Marches are a regular part of training, and soldiers are usually expected to stand at attention when a high-ranking officer comes onto the scene, whether it's freezing cold or burning hot that day. But don't count on being able to cover up. Most military commanders enforce the rules against non-regulation wear when standing in formation, and that includes sunglasses during the summer or earmuffs and gloves during the winter. While some commanders might take mercy during brutal weather, there's always fear of violating protocol. After all, they have a boss too. Sometimes it's not about what you do, it's about what you use. Heading back to the world of international law, weapons of war have changed a lot from past wars. Soldiers now have many new options for fighting, and with that, the Geneva Convention has outlawed many past weapons, deemed inhumane. Some were found to have no strategic purpose beside causing pain. Others were deemed deceptive and against the spirit of combat, and others were just plain weird. These are some of the strange weapons that have been thrown on the dustbin of combat history. Much like hollow point bullets, which expand and become harder to take out, the world is cracking down on the use of bullets designed to impair medical help. One of those banned types of bullets is bullets that leave no detectable fragments, any item that can't be found using X-rays. This includes plastic or fiberglass weapons that a surgeon would have to dig around looking for manually. Military surgeons often work fast and try to save many lives in a short period of time, and trying to save one person with non-detectable fragments in their body could doom several others. This one isn't entirely banned, but don't even think of trying to use it as a weapon. Is there any more powerful natural weapon of destruction than fire? A single spark can create a wildfire that destroys an entire ecosystem. So it's no surprise that flamethrowers are heavily regulated in combat. These gas-powered fire shooters can be an invaluable tool for clearing foliage or blocking a military's advance, but the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons makes it illegal to use them as weapons. While it might make for a great movie visual to turn a flamethrower on enemy forces, in reality it just makes you a war criminal. It's not the only weapon of fire banned. It was one of the most shocking moments of World War II. The only successful attack on the US mainland came not from an army or a bomber, but from a fleet of balloons carrying incendiary bombs. After a family in Oregon was killed, the government covered it up and kept an eye on the sky, but surprisingly, these fire balloons weren't banned after the Second World War. They were already crimes against humanity since the 1898 convention. While they're not particularly deadly weapons, their deceptive nature and their likelihood of targeting civilians makes their use unacceptable in war. The next weapon is largely banned for civilians and military use: lasers. Sure, in the movies they're usually used to terrorize James Bond, but they're no less dangerous in real life. There have been close calls when high-powered laser pointers were used to blind airline pilots, putting entire planes in jeopardy. But the military gets a little more leeway when it comes to these powerful light beams. Lasers are allowed in combat, but only if they're only capable of causing temporary eye impairment in the enemy. Any lasers that can permanently blind someone are seen as weapons designed to maim and are strictly prohibited. And if you're thinking of upgrading your ammo, don't. Poisoned bullets might sound like something out of a spy thriller, but it's actually a ruthless tactic dating back thousands of years. One of the first war conventions ever signed was between the Holy Roman Empire and France. It involved not using poisoned bullets in their weapons. The method of poisoning them was rather primitive. It included storing ammo in dead bodies to infect them with deadly germs before firing them. It's now possible to infuse bullets with deadly synthetic toxins. Possible, but highly forbidden, because the Geneva Convention has banned the use of poisoned ammo, and it's largely become the domain for terror groups only. Sometimes a treaty is maintained because both sides fear the alternative. There are few things scarier than an outbreak of deadly disease, as the world knows full well. But the use of biological weapons has been a dirty secret of warfare going back millennia. Famously, soldiers in the United States gave natives blankets that were infected with smallpox. But the ruthless tactic has since been banned by international law, and it's one of the most abided by treaties in the world. There's a simple reason for that. Diseases do not obey borders or differentiate between armies. That means that if a plague gets unleashed upon one army, it likely won't be long before it infects the people who sent it as well. People would like this weapon to be gone as a whole, but they're not focusing on one kind. The campaign to outlaw landmines has gained a lot of steam, but the Ottawa Treaty still has some big obstacles in its path. Namely, none of Russia, China, or the United States has signed it. This means that large parts of the world are still dotted with the explosive devices, but the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons has made a dent in one area. The meeting agreed to outlaw the use of plastic landmines and others with no metal parts. These devices can't be detected with X-rays, and as such are very difficult to clear even after the war is over. The world is very careful to avoid any weapons that could render it uninhabitable. Many people would love to get rid of nuclear weapons altogether. After all, there's something creepy about knowing that you're one button push away from total annihilation. But while nuclear nations are not ready to give up their big guns, there are laws against a certain kind of nuclear weapon: the dirty bomb. This is a conventional bomb that's loaded with nuclear material. While it wouldn't cause a mushroom cloud or turn a city to ash, it's possible one of these bombs could render a whole city uninhabitable for decades due to the nuclear fallout, much like what happened in Chernobyl. But some banned items in war are a little more bizarre. Biological warfare is a large category, usually encompassing the use of natural toxins or viruses to poison the enemy. But it has a subcategory that will give many people the willies: entomological warfare. This is the use of insects to attack the enemy, often by unleashing parasitic insects to harm crops. While multiple parties have done research into the tactic, it's only been unleashed a few times, most famously by Japan against China in World War II. Japan's military used plague-infected flies and fleas to spread disease amongst the Chinese population, causing a massive pandemic that killed hundreds of thousands. Those who campaigned against this type of warfare celebrated when the tactic was banned by the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention of 1972, and there is no sign of it coming back in the form of trained attack wasps yet. This one might sound like a Looney Tunes gag, but that doesn't make it less deadly. One of the biggest dangers of warfare is when the environment itself is turned against you. A soldier walking through the jungle when the ground collapses under him, sucking him into a pit below. This isn't a freak sinkhole, it's a spike pit. A dug hole then filled with sharpened bamboo spikes designed to wound or kill the unfortunate soldier. Well, this was a primitive technique dating back thousands of years. As it was ideal for stopping mounted soldiers in their tracks, it didn't stay in the past. These death traps were being used as late as the Vietnam War. Some armies even used poison or animal feces on the spikes to ensure that if someone survived the spikes, they weren't likely to stay alive for long. The horrible injuries caused by these traps were enough to convince the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons to ban these traps for good in 1979.